We save literally millions of pounds in the teens. We're looking to someday we'll be 25 million, then 35 million pounds that would otherwise go to the landfill. Some of it's recyclable, so it could get melted down. But again, as you referenced at the very beginning, the famous reduce, reuse, recycle triangle, the highest and best use of waste is reuse. Let's not melt it down. Let's not grind it up. If you can think outside the box, find a second alternate use for it. Let's just keep it as is instead of melting it, grinding it up. So
this is BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgenson.
Welcome out to BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio. I'm your host, Tyler Jorgenson, and today I'm really excited about this one. As a huge fan of repurposing and a slightly admitted pack rat, I love what the business that this entrepreneur has created. Damon Carson has created Repurposed Materials, Inc. That is the sexiest of the three parts of the recycle, reduce, reuse triangle. And they talk about some really, really cool stuff that you guys are doing over at Repurposed Materials. I'm excited to dive into it. Welcome out to the show, Damon.
Tyler, I'm excited. You admitted off air before we even got on that you're a bit of a hoarder. So this, like I said, this could be a great temptation for you. So yes. We will try not to get you too excited.
When I got your pitch and I was browsing your website, I was like, oh, I need most of these things. And so, all right, let's assume that somebody hasn't already gone and visited repurposedmaterialsinc.com. What is the business?
So I think the easiest, most succinct way to describe it, a good word picture, is just we're an industrial thrift store. So maybe said another way, Tyler, is we're in the used surplus salvage business. And maybe a third way to say it is we deal in the cast-offs and discards of American industry.
And that part, maybe not the most sex appeal in that, but man, it is cool what you guys are doing. And so I want to zoom way back.
Sure.
Because this is not an easy business to just like start up and decide you're going to do. There's a lot of moving parts. There's space and cost and distribution and all these and sourcing. There's a lot. But let's go back early days, Damon. When was the moment you first realized you were an entrepreneur?
Well, I used to have a paper route as a elementary school student, and I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't participate in the contest to double the number of subscribers, so you double the amount of money you made as a youngster. So I guess I was shy, introverted. So there was no big light bulb as an elementary school student. Going into high school, I was the son of a business owner. My father was. And so I think I always kind of had it in the back of my mind, but I don't know. I don't know that there was any early light bulb moments like the lemonade stand kid. That wasn't me.
Sure. Okay. Well, how did you get into this?
So this specifically started in 2010. So about 15 years ago. So I'm in my early 50s. So we have to jump back to in my mid 20s. I and a partner bought a traditional garbage company in the ski resorts, Vail, Breckenridge, Colorado. So we had the big roll-off trash containers that we'd put out on construction sites, get filled full of trash, you take it to the landfill, you'd slide it out, dump it, tip it back, and you'd see all this stuff come out. And, there was perfectly straight 2x4s. There's a window brand new in the wrapping. I mean, just became very aware of the waste in America because we literally saw it every day. So sold that company to Waste Management, jumped out. So got out of the waste business, bought a couple of unrelated businesses. And again, that was the beginning of the 2000s when we sold the company to Waste Management. And yeah, one day I had a unrelated business and a airbrush subcontract painter was walking out one day and he just turned and looked at me and he said, "Hey, Damon, if you ever get a chance to buy an old advertising billboard vinyl, like you see on the sides of the highways, advertising Budweiser, Chevrolet, Coca-Cola, you got to get one. They make a great drop cloth for painting." And that was my eureka. That was the moment that, oh my gosh, we can repurpose and give an alternate second life to these waste streams, that hence the name of the company, Repurposed Materials.
I think what I love most about that story is, one, the seed of the idea had been planted earlier in another business, right? You'd seen it. You'd seen this waste and you didn't do anything about it yet, but it was there and it grew. And then when you heard this other idea, it's like, man, okay, there's something here. But you guys have multiple locations. I mean, a lot of land that you need to store, because I mean, American industrial waste is not a small item situation, right? You're not talking about just ball bearings and little items, right? You got a lot of stuff. So how did this expand?
So I want to step back and answer one of the questions. So I
Please.
grew up in rural America, central Kansas. And so I grew up in and around farming and ranching. Actually, agriculture is the one industry that's never lost sight of this repurposing, taking something met in life number one for one thing, repurpose it for life number two. Railroad ties become fence posts. Old oil field pipe becomes corral fencing. So when you see all this waste in my garbage days, I mean, it just took me back to my agricultural rural roots. And it's just like, farmers and ranchers could figure out what to do with this stuff. So I just want to jump back to that for a moment. But yes, in answer to your most recent question, I mean, this stuff is big and heavy, semi-loads, truckloads, multiple truckloads. So it takes acreage. It takes under roof warehousing. So our average warehouse is about 2 acres of lay down outside yard and about 30 to 40,000 square feet under roof. So one of the, I don't know if it's a surprise, it's just a fact. When you get a truckload in, you just don't immediately find that alternate second life for it. It takes weeks and months to make that happen, to make those connections. Well, in the interim, it has to sit somewhere. The corporation that's getting rid of it, they want it gone. They don't want to store it until you make those connections, connect those dots. So yeah, it's a very logistically intensive business. Logistics, as we know, is trucking. Logistics is warehousing and storage. It's all fits under that, the big L word, and takes a lot of space and time.
So you had this idea based on the painting drop cloth from an old billboard, right? But when did it first seem like it's actually going to be a business that works?
So just a little timeline, a little 6-month timeline. So September of 2010 is when that airbrush painter gave me the idea. I made a couple of phone calls and found 20 billboards for sale from an outdoor advertising company here in the Denver area. That's where we live and that's where it started. Went down to South Denver in my, half-ton pickup, put them in my truck and posted them on Craigslist. And, they started to sell. And it was $20, $50, $75. It was just, the technical MBA term at that point was entrepreneurial screwing around. I mean, it was just, hey, can I buy them for X and sell them for 2X?
Yep.
About 6 weeks later, one of our customers came in talking about billboards, and we got to talking about rubber products. And for some reason, in the next day or 2 or 3, I was online Googling, and conveyor belt from the mining industry. Life number one conveys rock, sand, aggregate. What happens when that stuff, it's a wear part, when it gets too thin? So made a couple of phone calls, found a magical 2 rolls. I mean, I was taking a big risk. 2 rolls of used conveyor belting, and likewise posted them on Craigslist. And, within a week or 2, those 2 rolls had sold. That was October. November. What's the holiday in November? Thanksgiving. We're just about there. Driving back home to see my folks in central Kansas, I-70 from Denver to central Kansas. And that's where my farm and ranch knowledge and background. And it became a hypothesis. Are there enough byproducts, wastes, cast-offs, and discards that can get a very different second life that I could make a business out of it? So that was the little 3-month from, hey, they make a great drop cloth for painting to, hey, here's a hypothesis for a whole business model.
Yeah. Give us, for maybe the people who are struggling to really visualize the opportunity and what's going on, give us some of the fun stuff, some of the best, case studies of what type of things you guys have done repurposing on.
So we look for things that are generic, versatile, and adaptable. So, the chair you're sitting in, Tyler, it's specialized. If you're done with it and you put it on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, the person that buys it from you is probably going to use it as a chair. By contrast, the door that's shutting you into the room, your recording studio, you take the hinges off, you take the doorknob off, and you go horizontal with it, it becomes a shelf. So chairs specialized, the door is our 3 words: generic, versatile, adaptable. So those are the things we go out in the industry and look for. One of the things that's fun about it, so there's a lot of gambling in this business. So I joke that I'm sitting here in my office. I don't have to get on an airplane and fly to Las Vegas to gamble. I just get to sit in the office and try to pick and choose which of these waste streams, which of these cast-offs we think we can rehome. But we take a big risk. So we bring them in. We don't know if it's going to be the cranberry farmer in Wisconsin, the copper miner in Arizona, or the golf course superintendent in Florida that's going to raise their hand and say, hey, I can repurpose that. I can reuse that. So a lot of mystery, but a lot of fun in solving that. It's one of my analogies is, in crime novels, crime TV shows, it's a whodunit. There's a bank robbery, whodunit. Well, in our business, it's a who has it and who wants it. So a lot of detective work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so some examples of things that I've seen you guys do. I mean, I think some things are people understand a little bit quicker. And, you've got the military parachutes that people will use as a wedding canopy, sure, or, things like that. But then, that's kind of being repurposed into maybe more commercial or more end user type stuff. But a lot of it's going from one commercial type of use to another commercial type use. Has there been any repurpose or reuse that's really was a big surprise to you?
Yeah, on and on and on. So I remember about 6 months after I started, a lady calls me, and she says, Damon, do you ever get old street sweeper brushes? And I was like from the street departments, like the big brushes with plastic bristles. Yeah, those. I said, well, I don't have any. I didn't even know about them. But let me ask you a question, ma'am. What would you do with those in life number 2? And she says, they make a great back scratcher for livestock. And so here you're listening to customer feedback. I had no idea. Totally over my head. And now 15 years later, we sell used street sweeper brushes to zoos, to dairies. So it's just crazy. All these little niche industries have figured out some of these repurposes, and we just try to pay attention and listen. And we get surprised all the time by the brilliance, ingenuity, resourcefulness of our customers. We often affectionately call them. I don't know, Tyler, if you're old enough, but if you remember the late 80s, early 90s show MacGyver.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, this is our customer base, our modern day MacGyvers.
Yeah. And I mean, what an amazing thing, even just from a, ecological perspective, to save this much from going into the straight to the landfill and the waste that creates. Just the idea of life number 2, it's such a neat concept. So, not that you did this to be a charity or a nonprofit, but neat that it has that side benefit for real.
Yeah, so very gratifying. I mean, we save literally millions of pounds, in the teens. We're looking to someday we'll be 25 million, then 35 million pounds that would otherwise go to the landfill. Some of it's recyclable, so it could get melted down. But again, as you referenced at the very beginning, the famous reduce, reuse, recycle triangle, the highest and best use of waste is reuse. Let's not melt it down. Let's not grind it up. If you can think outside the box, find a second alternate use for it. Let's just keep it as is instead of melting it, grinding it up. So yeah, a lot of gratification from an ecological sustainability standpoint, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like in 6 months, it really went from your entrepreneurial screwing around into this, let's see if we can actually turn this into a business. But when was the moment where you really realized, hey, this is going to be something, we can grow this?
Absolutely. 2 seminal things happened in the summer of 2011. So, 9 months later. One is the New Jersey Recycle Association got word of what we were doing. So again, we're in Denver, Colorado. The New Jersey Recycle Association caught word of what I was doing and asked me to come and keynote their conference about this new frontier that I was 9 months into. That was one. The second one was somebody else in, it's funny, I already referenced copper miners, but the copper mine in Arizona called me and said, hey, would you come out and visit some of our mammothly large copper mines because we want to do better with waste. We hear you're pretty pioneering in your efforts. Come and see some of our waste. So the summer of 2011, those two events were like, okay, I think we're onto something here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny how exciting it is to be called to go and look at somebody's waste, but but it's because, a lot of times, especially like you said, in industry, the waste is significant, and it's items that took a massive amount of engineering and development to create. So, I mean, they should have longer lifespans than they do. But oftentimes they no longer are safe to use in that industry or in that specific use. I'm looking through some of your like social media posts, and I'm seeing some really cool things like old bowling alley wood being turned into workshop desks. You know, conveyor belts used as backstops for shooting ranges,
Sure.
things like this. And I mean, just how cool, like the number of things that I'm seeing that are just really, really fascinating. And so how did you start expanding this from, an idea in in Colorado to multiple locations?
So it became quickly apparent, as I just referenced, the two events. One was New Jersey, one was Arizona. Oh my gosh, this is a national problem. Not that that's a surprise to anybody, but so then it's, as we talked about, very logistically intensive. So our first warehouse was Chicago, then Atlanta. So a triangle. We moved from Chicago to Iowa. We moved from Atlanta to rural South Carolina. But if you put pins on a map, we're about a day's truck drive from the majority of the United States. So there's what appears to be random pins on a map. It's very strategic. If you draw 400-mile circles around each one of those, you're about 8-9 hours from most of the United States. So if a call comes from Boston, it would go to Ohio. If a call comes from San Diego, it would go to Arizona. And so, yeah, that's the strategy. I mean, as far as making it happen, we've hired really good people, and they just have to go find a building. Some of the buildings we own, some of the properties we lease. So it's a combination. And then you got to go find a branch manager. And I mean, hiring people is an inexact science. Fortunately, right now we have a phenomenal team, but you don't always get it right the first time. Just ask the NFL coaches and general managers, their first round draft picks, how those have all turned out or not turned out.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good analogy. Hiring is sometimes kind of like drafting. So you guys, you obviously aren't new to business, but you've been doing this one for a while now. What was one of the first really big challenges that you faced in repurposed materials, and how did you overcome it?
So I always use an ice cream store analogy. So if I wanted to start an ice cream store here in Denver, and I would just find an ice cream producer, I would find a piece of real estate. I would go to several dairies, ice cream manufacturers, and I would taste their strawberry, their chocolate, and their vanilla, and pick one of the ice cream stores. And then I would have a source of ice cream. Then all I'd have to do is go find customers. That's really the only hard part. It is a hard part, but the only hard part. In the repurposing business, in the used surplus salvage business, it's really hard to find procurement opportunities, source materials to get your inventory. Sometimes I feel like we work just as hard or harder on the procurement side versus the selling side, whereas, again, an ice cream store, sources relatively easy. You just got to go find customers. Here, it's hard on both sides. So huge challenge. Well, it was a huge challenge at the start, and it's, if we want to continue to grow and get to 25 million pounds, 35 million pounds, we got to source more materials. We got to get the word out. We got to wave our hands. Hey, don't throw that away. Don't throw that away. Hey, call us, instead of just mindlessly throwing it in the scrap metal bin to go be melted.
Yeah. And, procurement being such a large part of what you do, because it's not necessarily a consistent feed, right? It's like every purchase could potentially be one-off. I'm sure you have many repeat sources, but what percentage of product is given to you in the exchange for the cost of just hauling it away.
Oh, now you're getting into
versus
now you're getting into the dollars and the cents. I mean, yeah, I mean it's a real percentage. I mean, products that, hey, if you haul it away, you can have it. Because again, they're facing disposal costs. So there's a real cost for them to, to landfill it.
Oh yeah.
Certainly, especially the bigger companies, the CEOs out talking, putting in the annual reports, hey, we have sustainability goals. So we did a deal with Apple in San Francisco, and they were taking out a bunch of huge 7-foot by 30-foot skylights out of one of their retail stores in Palo Alto. And it's Apple, billions of dollars. We talk green, we talk sustainability. My offer to them was, yeah, we can help you keep that glass out of the landfill. We won't pay for it, and you have to deliver it to us. And they were happy to do it because they could go back to shareholders, to customers, and say, hey, we didn't just mindlessly, wastefully crush that glass and put it in a landfill.
Yeah, and I just think that's really, really cool. That so many businesses, they want to be more conscious. The challenge oftentimes is it's not a big part of the business where they may not have a team that's, or person assigned to it. So the fact that you guys can kind of step in and help and facilitate in potentially pulling that, I mean, these guys delivered in that example,
sure,
is a big deal. What, you've shared about the brushes, and the animal back scratchers and things like that, right? Are there any things that you still just kind of scratch your head like, holy cow, this is hilarious that this happened, or any fun stories?
Yeah, one of them that I always, not an uncommon question. One of them that's kind of a favorite is, this was back a few years ago, Comcast cable. A lot of people are familiar with Comcast cable around the country. They reached out and they had 2 semi-loads of concrete pads. So imagine 4-foot by 4-foot, 4-inch thick concrete, precast, so it stays together. And they had holes in it. And what this was in life, number one, it would be placed out in a subdivision. They would set their telecommunications, fiber optic stuff on top of it. And then the holes were to run the conduit to each house to provide, Fox News, CNN, ESPN, etc. For whatever reason, these didn't get used, or they were used, brought back to the warehouse. We don't want these. Can you help us? So again, back to 3 words I used earlier: generic, versatile, adaptable. I thought, yeah, we'll take a risk on these. We'll gamble on these. Some industry, I bet, can figure out what to do with these. So we brought them in, and that one didn't take very long. Within probably a month, we had a motor freight company, a trucking company, call us and said, we'll buy them all. 2 semi-loads of these concrete pads. Great. You sign the dotted line on the invoice. Sir, what in the world is a trucking company buying these concrete blocks for, basically? He said, well, Damon, you have to understand, we're in Denver. That's when we were very small and Denver based. He said, a lot of times our trucks are only half full of freight. It's not always, full of freight. And sometimes what the freight is light. Well, some days we go to Wyoming. If anybody's driven through Wyoming, my wife and I joke, we've never seen a limp flag in Wyoming because the wind just blows and blows and blows. So their problem is, if they have light loads going to Wyoming on windy days, trucks can literally blow over. It's a big risk. It's a big cost in the industry. Comcast cable has these no longer good concrete blocks. The motor freight company said this is a solution. It's just weight or ballast, and they fill their trucks half full of concrete when they're half full, and it's a windy day in Wyoming. So again, problem, waste to Comcast cable. The telecommunications industry becomes solution to a trucking company.
Yeah, and they were probably already on pallets and things. They just, all right, here's the number. Throw 6 ballasts on there.
Yeah, 2,000 pounds of pallet. We need 6 pallets on that truck, or whatever the math is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love this kind of stuff. I love the ingenuity that goes into every one of your customers' acquisitions, right? They have to have that vision for how else it can be utilized, and how neat that you built that up and have done that. I mean, you guys have, like I said, multiple locations, And you're keeping, I think the email I got from you said over 15 million pounds out of the landfill this year. And that's just really, really cool to think about how much is being saved from that. On a personal level, what's one item on your personal bucket list you're going to accomplish in the next 12 months?
Business or non-business?
No, man, no, this is Damon.
Well, you said 12 months. It has to be 12 months.
We give or take a little.
Okay.
I'll give you a small buffer
my
there.
wife and I love to travel. So we've been married almost 28 years. Our goal before our 30th year of marriage, which is coming up soon, is we want to make it to our 7th and last continent, which is Antarctica, traveling. So that's what comes to mind when you ask the question. It's a little outside 12 months, but maybe 24 months. Maybe 24 months.
It could be, yeah. I'll take it. That is a perfect one. I think that's fantastic. I think how cool to make it to that 7th one. So few people do. That'll be a really cool thing. As we wrap up and get towards the end of the show here, I just think what you've built with Repurposed Materials is really, really cool. Any advice that you would give to entrepreneurs who are earlier in their business? I mean, you've done, this isn't your first business. You've been around for a bit. I know it's kind of a blanket question, kind of broad, but what advice would you give to someone who's just getting started?
It's funny. Tomorrow I'm getting asked to speak at an entrepreneurial competition for a bunch of high schoolers here in Colorado. So I'm speaking to them, and they're budding, burgeoning entrepreneurs. What am I going to say? I've got several things I'm going to say, but I think baby steps, little bets. If you could just manage risk, I think the biggest thing is I've observed many people who are just as smart or smarter than me, and there's a lot of them, but they're still working for somebody. It's risk. I think that's the one thing that differentiates the entrepreneur from, the people that aren't. If you had to name one thing, I mean, there's many, and I think you have to practice. You have to get used to handing over $1 or $100. And, I might only get $70 back because I made a mistake. But some days you hand over that $100 and you get $200 back. So I think, and you don't have to do it with $200,000 on your first move or $1 million, right. Baby step it if you can, little steps.
Yeah, I think that's really, really smart. I think so many people think that they've got to go raise a ton of money, build the next app that's going to be huge. But really the principle of just taking those little efforts and learning the process and learning to see and understand risk, I think that's fantastic. Damon, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with us how you created Repurposed Materials Inc. I think what you guys are doing is just awesome. I browse your site just seeing, hey, maybe I need a pallet of whatever that random thing is. So I love checking it out. If you guys are on social and stuff as well, all as Repurposed Materials. So everyone go check them out, give them a follow, and, maybe buy a used basketball courts worth of wood, because you probably need that.
It's absolutely what everybody listening to this needs. Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. And to all my biz ninjas, wherever you're listening, tuning, or watching, it's your turn to go out and do something.